and look forward to being able to work with him as we go forward. It is, for me, an honor to be here and to discuss what I think was a very important budget. This budget is being discussed as a growth budget by everyone, sir. And those who may wish to say that it is simply a growth budget must understand the Prime Minister when she said it is a sustainable, equitable budget, sir, that is focused on bringing balance and progress to all. And this is important because we must not forget that the evidence across the world would tell us that economic growth does not necessarily lead to social progress. And unless you have deliberate interventions to ensure that that growth is equitable, that all can benefit from that growth, that necessarily it doesn't mean that all will benefit. And this budget in particular was one that will guarantee equitable growth and social progress for all, sir, and it's because of that I am so proud to be able to support it. Of course, there are some countries like Cuba that didn't have a lot of economic growth that were still able to focus on social progress. It depends, sir, on the deliberate efforts to ensure that those who are most vulnerable should be able to prosper. And I want to begin on this idea of balancing economic growth and social progress because there is a myth that used to be propagated by the opposition then, the Democratic Labour Party, when they were in opposition and in government, that you could somehow separate the two, that you could somehow focus on the social part of it and leave out the economic part of it, that an economy, that a country was more than an economy, it was a society. And in 2016, sir, I gave a lecture in which I used the definition that I would like to share with you about social development, recognizing that it is planned social change designed to promote the well-being of the population as a whole in conjunction with a dynamic process of economic development. So you cannot separate the social component and the economic component. And if you were to try to do it, you do so at your peril, as we saw with the last administration. You need also to have growth if you are to be serious about social progress in this country, sir. So growth itself doesn't lend itself to social progress, but if you have deliberate policy interventions meant to ensure that that growth is felt by all, then it could work. And our position here is that this budget, sir, was a budget, sir, that would make sure that growth in this country would work for the poor, the poorest amongst us, sir. And we saw it, sir, in a range of activities. We saw it, sir, in the presentation made on energy, where we are putting roofs, the photovoltaics on the roofs of the poor. We saw it, sir, in relation to the work that is being done in agriculture to ensure that in this country, even for me and for those of us who have urban constituencies, that we are making sure that even in urban Barbados, there is some access to the benefits of those of us who have now benefited from the boom under the leadership of the Minister for St. Philip South, the member for St. Philip South. And so we know that you could also get land at layers to be able to allow that kind of urban development. We've seen the community care project, and I'm hopeful that in St. Michael South very soon we'll be able to have access to the skills that I know the Honourable Minister is making sure we all have access to, the skills to make sure that regular people in the towns and the cities could be able to do agriculture from home, the technical expertise, the pan carts and the various things, to be able to come and make sure that they plow the land and those things, sir, to make sure that growth works for all. And if there is going to be a theme, to my contribution today, it is that we must make sure that this growth works for all. Because at the end of the day, sir, we could talk about growth till the cows come home. But if your people don't feel it in St. Michael Northwest, and my people don't feel it in St. Michael South, sir, it is just talk. And that is why I feel that this budget must be seen in that context, with deliberate policy interventions to ensure that even as we grow, it is a kind of an equitable, sustainable approach to ensuring that all of us, sir, benefit from this. We have to move away from theory in these matters to reality in these matters. We have to make sure that when we say something will change the lives of ordinary people, that it really does change the life of ordinary people, sir. So we are seeing it in energy, we are seeing it in agriculture, we've seen it in the environment with the work that the Honourable Minister is doing to make sure that ordinary people have an opportunity in this country as well. Time and time again, every policy effort made to make sure that ordinary people can live. That is why I think the debushing program is so important. That is why I think the idea of elevating communities, sir, through the Clean and Green program is also very important. You know, there is in social policy a theory called the broken window theory. The broken window theory simply says that if you live in a community, it's really a housing policy. If you live in a community and you allow one window to go broken in that house without fixing it, then somebody else allows that window to go broken, then a door, then they let the place go without painting, then the roof, that eventually everything runs to ruin because you never took the time to address the small things. The reverse is also true, that if you put the time into making sure that you elevate communities one by one, piece by piece, you paint a house today, you check it, you're an MP. You paint a house today, the next door neighbor is likely to paint the house tomorrow. You clean and you green one space, as the Honourable Minister is doing, then the spaces next to it are likely to be improved as well. So that gradually you lift up a country without having to spend a whole lot of money. You elevate the dignity of a people without being able to spend a lot of money. These things, sir, are going to be important, sir. I feel very strongly about that. I feel very strongly about the community gardens that the Ministry of Agriculture is happening to offer to all of us. And so I read, when I was young, sir, a book called The Economic Hitman by John Perkins. It was a book, sir, some said it was a little bit dramatic. But in that book, in The Economic Hitman, the conversation is around persons who come into developing countries and offer advice with the idea that they cheat the country and they take from the country more than the country actually benefits. And while we designed our program, we don't have the risk of getting these economic hitmen here because our program that we are under was homegrown, designed by us, fashioned by us. Our budgetary proposals were our proposals, designed by us, fashioned by us. But the principle of it is what I'm talking about, that we have to be in a position to ensure that we do not forget that at every step along the way, the policies that we put in place will benefit the poor, the marginalized, disenfranchised, the persons who traditionally are not part of the economic growth of this country. And I think, sir, that we have to be very, very deliberate, very slow but purposeful in ensuring that everything that we do, sir, reaches the people who need help the most. I have had the privilege of coming from very humble origins, and I have the privilege of serving in a constituency of people of very humble origins. And every time I am thankful, sir, because there is a dignity in being poor. There is a strength that is given to the poor, a capacity to be able to respond and to be resilient in circumstances that are most difficult, that we oftentimes do not take into consideration the strength of regular communities, sir. And because of that, we often do not encourage or incorporate this thinking into a lot of our policies and into a lot of our programs. And sir, I am very grateful that today I have the opportunity to serve as your Minister of People's Empowerment. It is my training, but it gives me the opportunity to remind myself and to remind this House and to remind my colleagues that we were elected for the most part to serve ordinary people in this country, and that our policies must work for all. Sir, if we zoom out, we understand how poverty works. Poverty is normally determined by two things. It is determined by a person's income, or the income of the country, generally, and whether there is a lot of inequality in that country. Now, it would be nice to think that we could, like in developed countries, they're having a poverty rate of about $30 a day, 60 Barbados dollars. We don't have that luxury. But if you could have a poverty rate that is set like a minimum poverty income, And if you fall below that income, you're considered poor. At that height, well, then all of Barbados would be good. But we obviously do not have that luxury like they do in Sweden, for example. And it would be nice to think that we could have that as a minimum poverty level in Barbados. But we don't. And so what we must do is to be able to make sure that we have the programs that properly target those who need them the most. But we also have to make sure that when we implement policies that they do not widen the divide between those who have and those who do not have. I had cautioned, sir, the Honourable Minister responsible for energy, the first Honourable Minister, and I cautioned the current Honourable Minister responsible for energy, that as we build out our energy sector, it is going to be very important that we do not have a phenomenon known in the theory as energy poverty. Where in energy poverty, it is a case where the benefits that come, the possibility of being able to have lighting in your own house, the possibility of being able to make something from it is denied of the most poor. They don't have the chance to do it. I said we have to be very careful that that's not our reality. In this Parliament, sir, the programs that we discuss on energy, not only do they ensure that people have the opportunity to have access to the resources, but they are the most transformative that I have heard, because it allows ordinary people to generate revenue from their roofs. And that in our housing program, using that roof alone not only stops people from being poor, but it gives them a house. And where else in the world have you seen an energy program as transformative as this program that allows ordinary people to be able to pay for a house as the one that Barbados has, sir? It is, to my mind, the most transformative energy policy that I have seen, and I no longer have a fear that energy poverty will be our reality. Growth, sir, must work for all. And I take the opportunity, sir, now that I have the privilege of speaking of this ministry, to tell you about a few things that are happening in the ministry, sir. I feel, very importantly, sir, that the job of any country, and the job of this ministry, but the job of any country, sir, is to ensure that we, as the former Prime Minister used to say, stop poor people from being poor. The number one SDG is still poverty reduction, poverty eradication. That is still the mandate of the global community, to be able to say that we have eradicated poverty from the shores of the country. That is still SDG number one. And in many ways, we're no longer talking about it. We've gone quiet. But we have to rekindle that conversation, sir, on poverty, so that we elevate the interests of the poor in this country, sir. We have to elevate the interests of those who go to work every day, toiling from morning to evening, sir, to be able to pay bills in this country, sir, and do so with a certain dignity. And it is important, sir, because at the end of the day, you know, the world was making so much progress in terms of moving toward eradicating poverty. But COVID has decelerated that progress. So the rate at which we are increasing is now decreasing. And so we have to put poverty reduction strategies back on the table to ensure that we keep the poor in the center of our consciousness. I know you know what I'm talking about, sir, because you're always working on behalf of the poor in your community. But let me discuss a few things in the ministry that I came, sir, and found, some of which we are now trying to expand. Barbados will very soon have a child protection bill, child protection legislation. Sir, this is so important. And I know the Honourable Member for St. Thomas would have liked to have been able to finish the work she started, because it is so important that we have legislation, sir, that protects our nation's children, that makes having to report on abuse and so on mandated in the law, to be able to protect our children, sir. And you will see that legislation hopefully before this Honourable Chamber within the next few months, because the draft bill is at the stage where we're going between the CPC and the ministry to finalize the concerns that they raise, sir. You will also very soon be seeing elderly legislation, sir. Because, sir, the policy on the elderly, sir, is important. I want to thank UNICEF for helping with the child protection bill. I want to thank PAHO for helping with the elderly policy, sir. And we will have that hopefully within the next 6 months, sir, to be able to discuss with the country. Because a country is only as good as it treats its young and its old, and they say it's prisoners. But we have to treat our elderly well. I must also tell you, sir, that in a real way, COVID was a serious threat in a real way. We talk about it all the time. But COVID was a serious threat to whether people lived or died in this country if they were over 60 years old. It had a disproportionate amount of people dying. I mean, if you think about it, we don't think about it really in real terms. But in real terms, COVID was targeting the old. So it is almost as if you have a hitman singling out. I mean, if that were the case, we would have tried to protect our elderly. As this hitman going down the street, taking out old people. We did a lot in Barbados, sir. I look forward to being able to do more. And then, of course, sir, there's disability legislation that will also be coming to this house, sir. I want to thank the Honourable Member for St. James North, who has been working in this area for such a long time. Even now, as I speak, there's a consultation being had, sir, and that community is so frustrated. In their words, not in mine, in their words, they do not feel that they are reaping the benefits that are being bestowed to other people in this country. The disabled community is making it very clear in the consultation that they are frustrated, they feel left out, and in some cases, they feel forgotten. I feel it is my responsibility to give them the assurance that as their minister, I will engage them every step of the way, sir, and that where there are things to be done, that I will lead the fight to ensure that they're done, whether it is in housing, whether it is in transportation, whether it is in education, because in this country, the growth that we are talking about must be growth for all. And unless all benefit from the growth, sir, then it is what you call a distorted kind of growth, distorted development, and that is not the kind of legislation and country that we hope to be able to build, sir. But there are a few gaps in our policy prescription that I feel we need to be able to address. And to do that, I think it is going to be important that we rethink the way we look at, you're making me smile, sir, we rethink the way we look at the social services sector. And the social services sector, sir, requires, people think about the ministry and they think about handouts, they think about a little change here, assistance here, sir. I have a vision that the Ministry of People's Empowerment will become part of the productive sector, and that we move away from the idea of just being able to offer just the bare minimum, the basics, to being able to benefit from the fact, sir, that a lot of people who find themselves in these circumstances are able to make a significant contribution to this country. And if we allow them to do it, it will be to the benefit of the entire country. But there are some gaps. In housing, for example, sir, we know, sir, that there's still a possibility, sir, that if you find yourself in extreme need, as we did with Elsa, that you could lose your house today and there will be no space for you to be able to accommodate your constituents. There's no space. We do not have enough space. We have to have a space, sir, where there are emergency issues to be able to accommodate people, sir, who find themselves in need. We also know that even for our elderly population, as they live longer, we still do not have the facilities to accommodate persons who are elderly. We need more of what the Vauxhall Senior Citizens Home is. We need more of what the Seroptimists offer to be able to ensure that the older people in this country have a place to be able to stay. And then the recent case that was shown in the paper and on the news in relation to the young disabled couple who had nowhere to go, sir. And I must remind this House and Barbados that because you have a mental issue, a mental challenge, it is not necessarily that you have some crime, you're a criminal, you're mentally unstable. Sir, people all over the world at various levels of functioning are able to be integrated into their society if the society deems it necessary. Able to have jobs. I fought very long and very hard, sir, to be able to ensure that that couple was able to have some dignity. And as we go forward, sir, it shouldn't be a case, sir, where we have to fight for these things, But disabled people need to have a space too. And so I feel that as we build out, there is a space, I know the Honourable Member for St. George South has his eyes on it, but the space at Sterling, I feel, should be equipped for persons who have disabilities. To build that transitional housing, there's enough space to be able to do that and to be able to do a facility for women who oftentimes find themselves with children on the street. As a matter of fact, we had a case very recently of a young lady with 4 children who was evicted in Barbados by the children's father. And so the woman with the 4 children belonging to the man found themselves on the street with nowhere to go. And that we have to have a transitional facility to be able to accommodate that. However, let me just digress quickly for a second. You know, the greatest thing that this country can do, sir, is nothing that we can do in this parliament. It is nothing that we must come in here, sir, and talk about policy and legislation. The greatest gift that we can give to the people of this country is from one man to another, one woman to another, is the capacity to care. Because we have a responsibility, sir, to care for persons in need. And everybody is turning to the government. What is the government doing about this? And what is the government doing about that? We have to do more, yes. But we have a responsibility to care about other people in this country, sir. And so I feel very strongly that we must be able to do these things. I have, sir, a few programs. I see you keep looking up, so I will speed up, sir. I have a few.
I'm not rushing you, sir.
I have a few programs, sir, that I hope to be able to bring forward. So, but before I do, I want to thank the Barbados Children's Trust for the work that they would have done at Nightingale. If you haven't been to Nightingale, sir, I used to work at Child Care Board many years ago, and I returned now. I was there as manager. I returned now as minister. To see the transformation that has occurred at Nightingale is phenomenal. And I want to thank the Barbados Children's Trust for the work that they did there, sir, to allow people, these young children who have made these places their home, sir, to be able to live in comfort and in dignity. I also want to thank the Maria Holder Trust for the work they did at what used to be FAR's Children's Home. We cannot do these things, sir, on our own. And then, sir, there are a few programs that I hope to bring. I am convinced that one of the tools that we need to have in Barbados is that capacity to be able to generate, to have intergenerational exchange between the older community and the younger community. I think it is going to be so vital to solving our social problems so that younger people understand what older people have gone through. And older people have a chance to understand what younger people are dealing with. If we don't talk, then we don't have the chance to learn and to solve. And sir, there's a program that we will bring before the cabinet very shortly that I call Mend and Mentor, where I will be seeking to be able to help beautify some of the old people's homes, because many old people live alone. Around their houses is filled with bush. They may need a simple thing like a window fix, no major work, but that will be done by a younger set of people who live in the community. It's all community-based, and the responsibility would be for the person, one trained person, to mentor other young people to be able to do this work, sir. So you get the intergenerational exchange, they get the benefit of having their homes restored, and the young people get the benefit of learning a skill, sir. It is going to be a very comprehensive program, and it will help a number of households in this country, sir. And I'm hoping to at least do about 20 to 50 houses in every constituency in the first year, depending on the funds that are made available to be able to do it. But we have most of it covered in the estimate, sir. I also feel that one of the persons who bore the disproportionate brunt of COVID was the elderly. I said so. And so we're talking to some of these institutions about having a social program on the internet, so we would train them up. I've already spoken to the general manager of Lime, so that old people can talk to other old people online, because they don't want to go out and, they like to socialize, but they can't because COVID is their hitman. And sir, they have the opportunity to talk online, sir. We create the program, and hopefully Lime or Digicel, either, the one who calls me first, will be able to produce the highway that allows them to be able to communicate, sir. We have to return dignity, and we have to make sure that people live well. It is one thing to say that our country allows people to live long, but people must live well. So when you reduce mortality, you don't want to increase morbidity. You don't want people to live long and suffer. You have to put in place programs, sir, to make sure that when they live long, they do well, sir. Economic growth must be a benefit, sir, for all. Of course, we have other programs, sir. to help with medication and so on, sir. Some of these things that I will discuss later, another day. We also feel, sir, that it's going to be important that we restructure the ministry. And, sir, I've spoken in public before of the need to merge and amalgamate the social services sector. This is very important. We have been discussing this amalgamation now for about 25 years. We have had various political directorates agree that it is important. We haven't been able to deliver it. We are at an advanced stage in the ministry of delivering it. Very soon, hopefully, we'll be bringing to this place a conversation around how we intend to amalgamate. The next step will be to talk to all the stakeholders, sir, but National Assistance Board, Welfare Department, Child Care Board must come together to be able to offer better services to people. And the one thing that we have already insisted on as well is that there must be some kind of training in like communication, so that when people come to the welfare department, they don't feel that they're treated badly. But I must also say, sir, that the welfare department officers themselves have been treated very badly. Because if you visit a lot of these offices, sir, the welfare department, the main office, sir, is not fit for purpose. That space was never designed clearly for what is being asked to do. And so we have to make sure that we make the welfare department comfortable. I've already asked the Minister of Housing about the possibility, sir, just tell me what we're paying in rent and find another place so that they're comfortable. We give them, sir, the benefits that they need and the tools to do their job, but to make sure that they do the job so that your constituents, the DPM's constituents, my friend's constituents, all the constituents, do not come to us saying that they were treated badly at welfare, sir. We have caseloads, in some cases, of 500 cases to one person. Impossible. Impossible. We also need more staff. The other thing that we're doing very shortly, sir, and I'm talking about maybe by the middle of next month, is to ensure that there's a 24-hour service at the welfare department that allows them to respond to emergencies immediately. So that currently, sir, if you have a fire, and for me, most of my fires, unfortunately, occurred on Fridays, and that many times you don't see a welfare officer till the Monday. With this new department that we are putting in, this new unit, there will be 24 hours. And the moment that there is a fire, there will be someone there to respond immediately to make sure that that family is taken care of from the time that they have that incident, sir. I think that that is going to be very important. As I close, sir.
I will bless you with 5 more minutes, sir.
Thank you so much. I'm about to close. As I close, sir, I feel very strongly that we must think differently about poverty. There used to be a Reverend Thomas Malthus back in the day, I think in the 1700s. And he said, sir, it has appeared from inevitable laws of nature. Some human beings must suffer from want. He said, these are the unhappy persons who in the great lottery of life have drawn a blank. This is as defeatist a mindset and mentality, sir, that any man could have. That some people, regardless of whatever our station has become, have drawn from the great lottery of life a blank. And that you could imagine if that is your mindset, you never have recommendations, policies, programs to fix the concerns of the poor. It is not my mindset, sir. It cannot be the mindset of the Ministry of People's Empowerment, sir. Our ministry must think differently about poverty. We must think differently about the poor. We must think differently about vulnerability and what vulnerability is and how people become vulnerable. We must think differently about disability and what people are capable of doing. We must think differently about what being elderly means and what elderly people can do, the contribution they have made, the contribution that they can make, sir. We must think differently about the poor. And that has to be the mindset, sir. And as we think larger about these things, it will mean that we have to speak to education, because a lot of these things happen, so you don't just end up in poverty at the end of the day. We must talk about job creation, labor, housing. It's a wide conversation. This ministry, sir, our voices must be heard in relation to all of these things if we are talking seriously about ending poverty, sir. So as I close, my final comment, sir, is that I feel that we must put these issues back on the table. I feel that the Ministry of People's Empowerment is well positioned to be able to deliver effectively to the people. I feel and I know that economic growth alone will not guarantee social progress, but I am pleased that in this budget there are specific mechanisms to ensure that the poor people can benefit from growth, sir. And I feel that if we put our minds to it collectively, that the people who in this country, like the same disabled community that are conversing now, who feel that they're being left out, will not feel as if they're being left out, sir. And that it is our responsibility, our duty, and our charge, sir, to make sure that all people benefit from the growth that I know this budget will bring. With those few words, sir, I thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. John.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I want to share the sentiments of the Honourable Member who just took his seat, because I believe, Deputy Chair, that it is only when you come from the struggle that you recognize what he said and you take it to heart. And I too am from the struggle, so I believe every single thing and endorse every single thing that he said. Deputy Chair, 2 days ago, the Honourable Prime Minister made her speech, and I'm reminded of the words of a song from Cynthia Erivo, and this is attached to that movie with a black actress. And the words that I speak of: I'm going to stand up and take my people with me, and together we're going to build a brand new home. And I believe that these words were relevant when Prime Minister spoke, because I fully endorse the budget. And it's my intention that every time too that I stand up, it is my intention to take the people of St. John with me to a brand new home. And I also feel the same way in relation to my responsibilities at the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Community Empowerment. Mr. Deputy Chair, every single time for the last 4.5 years or so that I came to this place and was involved in hearing a budget presentation, I see and I feel the impact of what it is doing to the constituents of St. John. And I want to let them know that, again, I appreciate what they did on January 19th in sending me back to this place to represent them and to move to that brand new home. Because in my mind, the mantra of St. John Rising will never ever die, because I have seen where the growth is taking place. And from that budget, at the very basic level, when females, as mentioned by an honorary member before, can have zero VAT on the necessities that they would need for child and for self, I can't help but fully embrace everything that is in this budget, because I know at the end of the day that it will not only redound to those persons in the constituency of St. John, but by extension, Barbados as a whole. Permit me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to speak a little bit about the changes that I've seen in St. John, not only as a result of, or the things that will come from this budget, but the Honourable Minister of Agriculture, he did not mention the fact that Project Phoenix is happening in the constituency of St. John, where 32 young, unemployed individuals will be farming 50 acres of land at Wakefield. And it is only this week that they signed the document to officially get started. And this budget mentioned the fact that water will be at a reduced rate for those persons who are engaging in farming. And I welcome that, because I know that with this particular project coming on stream, that they will benefit from the relief that is coming from the reduction in water. Deputy Chair mention was made of the housing that we're looking to trigger in this country. And I'm fortunate that the Hope Project is also visiting the constituency of St. John, where 174 houses will be erected at Pool. And this is something that I'm pleased about because it provides an opportunity for those persons within the constituency to be able to acquire a piece of the rock through a project that I think is very, very visionary, a project that I fully support because I don't think that anywhere else you can find a housing development where you only pay for the land, but the photovoltaic panels on the roof, pay for the house, and the panels will pay for the land. So I'm seeing a situation where there's growth in the constituency of St. John as a result of the policies and budget after budget that is presented in this place by the Honourable Prime Minister. So I give thanks on behalf of the constituents of St. John in terms of what is happening and the fact that they are now benefiting in a meaningful way from a government who continues to be proactive with a leader who is doing all that is necessary to take us to that brand new home. Deputy Chair, I was fortunate because the Prime Minister, in her wisdom, in a sense, sent me home. And I will just share some of the things that are happening within the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Community Empowerment. And one of my former colleagues indicated to me, you know, you're the prodigal son, you're coming home. But there's no banquet at Sky Mall. It is a situation of me getting to where I need to move my young people forward. And I went to that ministry, I came from that ministry, and I returned, and there's a chalice in Sky Mall, a chalice of hope and opportunities for young people in this country. And I believe that this is the best time to be a young person in the landscape of Barbados because of all that is available in terms of training opportunities for those young persons in this country. So yes, there is a chalice of hope and opportunities. And I will share today, Deputy Speaker, some of those training programs that are inside of that chalice, that are embedded in the chalice. And it is my goal, it is my desire to ensure that our young people, in the words of that song, are taken to a brand new home in several different ways. The Youth Development Program is one of those programs that is responsible for doing a lot of training with those young persons who are not only at risk, but those who are in mainstream. We have several programs under that particular initiative. We have a sports training program that is across the country where the National Sports Council is mandated to provide training opportunities for those individuals who are seeking to get involved in sports at community level. And this is a good time because we have just released sports again on the landscape, and several people are happy. Last night I was by one of the honorable members and I saw a basketball game starting, and it was a joy on the court because that is my base as well, Honorable Speaker, Deputy Speaker. But we're moving in that particular direction. And some of the things that are happening, one of the first things I asked for, and I'm pleased today that it is actually taking place, I asked the Sports Development Officer to ensure that we have road tennis on display at Kensington Oval during this test match. And I'm constantly getting videos and snippets on WhatsApp of what is happening at Kensington. National Sports Council, they went in, they spoke to the cricket board. We have everything in place that road tennis will be highlighted on a daily basis for the duration of the test match at that particular location. But sports is one of those things that can motivate, one of those things that can provide upward mobility for those persons who, I believe it is a member for St. Michael East, like to refer to the socio-economic situation of our people. And I'm ensuring that through sports, that we can move all of those persons who possess the skill sets to go forward. And to that extent, Deputy Chair, Deputy Speaker, I have asked that we now own SAT training for those persons who are looking to go overseas to do scholarships, because I was made aware that it is between $450 to $600 for poor people, as the honorable member who sat before me indicated, to do training for those SATs. And I believe it is a travesty where you have a Ministry of Sports and Youth, and we cannot own that particular program that would allow those persons who are going overseas to be able to train or to have the tutoring for those SATs to do what they have to do in terms of improving their life. So that is a program that is coming. Deputy Chair, one of the things when I was at that ministry as a worker that I used to argue for on a continual basis is the fact that we were doing training at a level all through this island for 12 weeks, for 4 months, and we were providing nothing more than a certificate of participation. And I've asked, and we are well on our way to ensuring that every single training program that is coming from the ministry is now certified. Because I believe that we should have an opportunity where those persons who are engaging in training, whether it be dressmaking or whatever, that the certificate is carrying some weight at the end of the day, and we're not giving them a certificate of participation. The Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme, there's an extensive set of training, Deputy Speaker, that goes into that particular program. Maybe between 3 and 6 months of training, and at the end of the day, it is still a certificate of participation. And we have moved to a stage now where they're working in conjunction with the University of the West Indies to ensure that that particular program, when those young entrepreneurs are completed the training, will have a certificate that is now equivalent to something more than just that. So you have, for example, the Youth Entrepreneurship Program, you have business counseling and mentorship, entrepreneurial development, direct technical assistance, financial counseling, accounting service, marketing service, and all of these at the end of the day, and you're giving our young people a certificate of participation. I believe that, like I said, it is now at an end. Mr. Speaker, we have the Barbados Youth Advanced Corps, and those of you who would have heard the director in the well speak about this particular program can understand the impact that this is having on our young people who are entering that program. It was formerly the Youth Service, it is now the Barbados Youth Advanced Corps. And the results that are coming from that program is absolutely fantastic, and we're hoping that during the new financial year that we can push those numbers up from what they're at. They're probably about 172, I believe. The target that we're looking at is 900 persons to go through this program. Can we do it this year? Maybe not, but will we try? Of course we will. Because remember what I'm saying, Mr. Deputy Chair, we are looking to move our young people to that new home. I have asked that we find a way to bridge the gap between those persons in the penal system and getting them to reintegrate into mainstream society. So we're looking, and plans are in train to ensure that we are speaking with the prison service, and we're going to attach those persons who are exiting the prison service to one of the youth commissioners. And then we're going to try to get them into some of the programs that are available through the ministry. The Community Secretariat Program, I had a chance last month to meet with those ambassadors from St. Lucie who won a particular competition. And this is a program that we're looking to make sure that we can engage and we can embrace, again, as many youngsters as possible. It will be a situation where there's a new mantra at the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Community Empowerment, because I'm fully aware, fully cognizant that if we do not do what is necessary to embrace all of those youngsters, those outside of mainstream society, that we will pay a serious price at the end of the day if this is not done. So we're moving in that direction. All of the programs through the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Community Empowerment will now be decentralized. Shortly, all members will be receiving a package with all of the training programs that are available from the ministry so that you too can help in terms of channeling persons within the ministry. I'm forced, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to use that youth lens, and I have no problem using a youth lens because that is the only way that we're going to attract and the only way that we can understand what is happening in that particular demographic. And I have been there before, and like I said, I've returned, and I'm using the youth lens to ensure that all of those things that are being requested from our young people are being put in place. Mr. Speaker, another thing that is happening within the ministry, as was mentioned before, the construction of 15 mini stadia. And we are on our way in terms of completing that task. Yes, we have some reasons for pause, but that will be taken care of soon, and we will have those 15 mini stadia in the first instance. And the plan is to expand where they reach every single constituency where it is possible to ensure that our young people have an environment that they can engage in structured activity that will make them better citizens in this country. The lighting upgrade is something that is coming. I know several members would have indicated that this is something that is required in their particular constituency, and we're moving apace to ensure that we can have all the lightings up and that they'll be ready soon because we know that sports is available again at every level practically. So we need to have those lights in place. Community development, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is one of the areas that we need to address. It is one of the areas that we need to fix. And I can assure you this evening that plans are in place and we are fixing what is necessary at that particular entity to ensure that we have best practices. We are trying to put measures in place that we will have a situation that the peak hours or those hours that we deem to be the ones that we should more or less have people within the centers, the evening portion of the day. We're ensuring that that is in place where maybe from 4:30 to 10 o'clock that a staff member will be at these locations to ensure that persons can utilize and fully utilize all of the community centers across this country. I note that there's a number of them that is in a state of disrepair, but the money voted this year for this budget, for this financial year, there are funds in there to do some of the repairs to those community centers and pavilions. We are trying as much as possible to be proactive in the approach in terms of developing our young people. It is only last week that I had a WhatsApp message from what is equivalent to the Minister of Sports in Ghana, and he's looking to trigger an MOU between his government and ours that we can do an exchange in terms of sports. He's also mentioning that they're looking to see how best that they can get Barbados involved in the African Games, and I think that this is another opportunity for us to grow sports and to move sports to a different level. For far too long, we've been hearing that government after government, we make sport at sports. And I'm trying my best to ensure that that is a thing of the past in relation to what is happening within the ministry that I'm supposed to manage. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is good that, like I said, it's a good thing for young people at this point in time. All of the opportunities are being placed on the table. Those initiatives that we believe can move young people forward, we will do that. The sports policy is supposed to be coming back to Cabinet for ratification very soon, and we expect that that will then place even more, will shine a spotlight more on sports in this country in terms of how we treat sports. There are several NFs, national federations, that indicated that they are looking to move to a semi-professional stage in terms of how they treat their particular discipline. And one of the things that we will do is to embrace that and see how best that we can have that in place. Because if we can do that, then a lot of the scouts that are coming to the island to look at what is on offer will probably move some persons in terms of scholarships, and some persons will get involved at a professional level and make money to move them forward. Mr. Deputy Speaker, one of the things on my personal wish list is to have a national center where we can see all of those persons who would have contributed in a significant way to sports in this country highlighted. The Village Gymnasium, there I think about 34 acres of land at that particular location that can be utilized for sports. A National Hall of Fame for sports is what I'm talking about. And it's one of the things that we're exploring to see if it is possible for those persons who are on the landscape. I was told recently that maybe government should look at honoring Jim Wedderburn because he's in his twilight years and nothing was done for him. And I believe that we should look to ensure that not only him, but those persons who would have contributed at the national level, that it is something that we can do for them, that when they walk the streets of this country, that it is known that these are people who would have sacrificed, these are people who would have gone and represent us at the very, very highest level. Only this morning, before I came here, there was a press conference with Josh Kelly, who was turning professional as a cyclist in Miami. And he's the first person in cycling that would have gone to that level. And we need to ensure that we can maximize and we can have that replicated time and time again. Football is one of those sports that we see a lot of emphasis in terms of the money. I have a youngster now in the United States who is struggling because he was offered a contract, but now there's some hard time and he cannot necessarily handle the financing. And the ministry is looking to put measures in place to ensure that he can continue on his journey, not only to make himself proud, but to make the country proud as well. So, Mr. Speaker, these are some of the things that I wanted to share in relation to the ministry in terms of what we're doing. And we will continue to be proactive. We will continue to see our young people as the future. We will continue to embrace them. It is youth sports and community empowerment. And if we have a situation where our young people and our sport is up at a level that we are satisfied, then that can only redound to community empowerment. Because you can understand when there's a youngster that is doing well and reach the peak coming from a particular community where you have a community feeling the pride of having that individual. I can speak of Tristan Evelyn as a product of St. John. And I know that if you go to Charigova and Henley area, that persons will tell you, well, look, this is somebody who we are aware of in terms of their coming up in the particular community. So, Mr. Speaker, it is what we are pushing. I understand community development, and hence I have asked that every single youth officer develop a community group within their particular locale or the area that they're working with, because the only way that you can have community development at that sustained level, in my opinion, is if you have functioning community groups, if you have the gatekeepers in a particular community embracing those persons who are in a community group. And one of the things that we're looking to do is to use the community groups to build the profile of particular communities that are struggling, particular communities that are being impacted by violence. If we can have a functioning community group at that particular location, then it is so much easier to run project after project inside of that. You're signaling to me, Mr. Speaker. I will wrap. I will wrap soon. So I hope this evening, with my particular presentation, that members and the wider Barbados get an understanding of what is happening at the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment. They all go hand in hand. And like I said, I'm working to make sure that every single community is impacted by the work of that particular ministry that I manage, to make sure, Mr. Speaker, that every time we stand as a government, that we're taking our people with us. Together, we're going to a brand new home. I am obliged.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. members in the chamber, and those who are listening. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lend my voice to the budgetary proposals as articulated so nicely by Prime Minister, member for St. Michael Northeast on Monday, and also supported by members in this chamber. And I must, at this time, pay my respect to the member for Christchurch East Central, who has been doing the heavy lifting and supporting all the efforts of this government in the role as Minister of Finance within the Ministry of Finance. But I want to start, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with a biblical quote from Isaiah. Isaiah 43, chapter 43, verses 1 to 3. And this, I spoke to my pastor 2 days ago, and I tell him, give me a scripture verse that happily describe our journey from 2018 to present. And Isaiah 43, and you know he is listening, and he just messaged me, verses 1 to 3. And it goes like this. But now listen to the Lord who created you. The one who formed you says, do not be afraid, for I have ransomed you. I have called you by your name, and you are mine. When you go through the deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through the rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burnt up. The flames will not consume you. For I am the Lord, your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. We have gone through the hottest fires. We were not burnt up. We went through the rivers of difficulty, and we did not drown. And I started there because on Monday, when we listened to the budgetary proposals by the Right Honourable Prime Minister, we recognize that we have come thus far by faith. And we have to give kudos to the Almighty who guided us through the fires and the difficulties in the rivers. And we are here to present a budget that is geared towards giving us a 1% surplus. And this budget, members, Deputy Speaker, gives us the optimism of the social and economic development of this country. We have to be optimistic as we go into our ministries day by day to execute the strategies articulated in those budgetary proposals. We have to ensure that we keep our heads above the waters. That is why Isaiah 43 verses 1 to 3 describes where we came from and where we are going at this stage. But the budgetary proposals touch on every single sector. And while I don't want to rehash what was said by the honourable members, because I listened the entire morning and yesterday, and also Monday to the Prime Minister, we still have to recognize that some measures touch the indigent, the poor, the middle class, the business sector, the rich and the poor. And one that stuck with me, the removing of the VAT from personal items, personal care items, and that will benefit every single sector of this society. And the final one, because we have to ensure that we don't create two Barbaduses as we govern and as we lead our people. And the one-off pandemic levy, 15% of net income for the years ending March 2021 and 2022 for businesses in the telecommunications sector and the petroleum industry and the insurance industry and in the banking sector. The credit union was left out, and we know why. And those measures will certainly ensure that we are not creating two Barbaduses in this country. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, each time I stand in this lower chamber, I stand on the shoulders of a family and community of St. George South who raised me and who sent me to this honorable chamber. And I am therefore not far from my community moorings. So I want to thank the good people of St. George South for giving me the opportunity yet again to represent them, not only in this honorable chamber, but as their parliamentary representative for the third time. And I know, just like I have the confidence in every single member in this team, these budgetary proposals that were articulated would give us the opportunity to return to this honorable chamber yet again after we've executed our mission within our various ministries. I know what it is to help someone who's building a house turn concrete. I know what it is to give up my discount for cement to allow someone who's building a house to have that opportunity to build a house. And I'm not going too far from understanding that the people in this country needs affordable housing. So as we build out every sector, we have to understand that housing is at the nucleus. And it was said by JFK, John F. Kennedy. He said that the home is about the central nucleus of our society. Because why? That is where we raise our families. That is where we pay our VAT. That is where we vote. And it is true. When we look at countries and we see poor housing, we see countries that have ill health and social decay. But when we look at countries that have good housing stock, what we see? Wealth creation, good health care, education. So housing revolves around education, health care, wealth creation. And it is important as I move into my mission given to me on Monday and before by the Honourable Prime Minister. Some of my colleagues call me Houdini. Some refer to me as a sophisticated sorceress, that's the word, who believes in black magic. But I'm telling you, sorcerer is sophisticated sorcery. Thank you, Wilfred. Member for Christchurch East. But I believe that the mission given to me by the Honourable Prime Minister is one that we can achieve. We can achieve the Barbadian dream for every single Barbadian who wants to own a piece of this rock and who wants to have a home. So the whole aspect, Mr. Deputy Speaker, home ownership is the essence of what I term the Barbadian dream, and one of the key principles in our 2016 Covenant of Hope and in our manifesto that I have here, where we recognize housing as essential to achieving a just, equitable, and developed society, where people in the country flourish and achieve their full potential. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the question that is posed by many people in this country, how are we going to achieve these 10,000 houses that the Prime Minister spoke about on Monday and during our campaign, and that are articulated in our BLP manifesto? And the member for St. Philip West and I, we joke daily when I pass her. You know, we joke and I say to her, hold your title deeds, because I am on a rampage to build houses. And that is our joke. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Labour Party, this said Labour Party, has a proud track record of building the most houses, private sector-led, in the history of governance in this country. And if we can do it then, we can do it now. So the mission of building 10,000 houses in 5 years is not a surmountable one, and I will explain to you why I'm saying that. There's no magic. We just need to come together, the private sector, the international community, and our local community. And I have a strategy. Government proposes to cater to all economic classes as we embark on the housing revolution, the first of its kind in this country. I want to pause and thank the member sitting to my left, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, who started this journey of creating home ownership program called the Hope Inc., where we utilize the roofs, the rooftops, to give people the economic opportunity and the social opportunity to own their own homes. So Hope Inc., Hope Advance, and Hope Premium were formed by the former Minister of Housing, where we took this society and we classified it in 3 categories. Those persons earning income between $1,000 to $2,000, they are part of the Hope Advance program. Then persons earning between $2,000 to $4,000 monthly, they are part of the Hope Incorporated program, which is the commercial private sector entity that was formed, named Hope Incorporated. And then we have the Hope Premium, with persons earning over $4,000 up to $8,000 a month. And the Hope Inc. program is geared to produce some 1,200 houses in the financial year 2022 to 2023. And I want you to understand, this is the first time in this country that working class people, maids, janitors, general workers, policemen, policewomen, nurses assistants, nurses aides, and all those persons who are earning below $2,000 and $3,000 and $4,000 will have the opportunity to own their own homes without purchasing the land. All they have to do is pay for the infrastructure, and how they will pay for the infrastructure by getting a mortgage. So a PPP, private-public partnership, where we provide the land at peppercorn rate, and the investors take ownership of the roofs for 20 years, and that is how they pay for the infrastructure, that is how they pay for the services, and that is how they pay for the photovoltaic systems. And that is what the Hope is about. Hope ownership, providing energy, that's the name. And that is the photovoltaic trust, the trust to green in this economy, member for Christchurch West Central. And there's no more powerful way to enfranchise working class people. Not only working class people, but persons who pay taxes in this country. And their dream is to own a piece of the rock. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will give a little facts here so persons listening can understand how they can be empowered and what I call reasonable rates to own a 2-bedroom house. Persons with a 2-bedroom house can pay as low as $759.36. That includes insurance for the home. Persons owning a 3-bedroom house can pay mortgage of $980.22, inclusive of insurance costs as well. And Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, we are on our way. Because presently at Lancaster, we are building some 154 houses, 30 of which will soon be finished. I heard the member for St. John spoke about Pool North 174 in St. John under this Hope initiative. The member for St. Lucie in Colleton, we have 74 houses to build. Toz North in St. George, 194 under the Hope initiative. 115 member for St. John at Pool South in St. John. These are all lands identified by Hope Inc. And I said earlier, 30 of the houses at Lancaster in St. James are ready to be handed over in about 3 weeks' time. and another 100 of 275 houses at Chancery Lane in Christchurch are at various stages of completion. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we hear about building 10,000 houses, refer to Isaiah chapter 43, 1-3. Because where there's hope, we will achieve. And we have demonstrated as a government, we have come through the roughest fires and the toughest seas. We have been criticized by the naysayers, but yet we are here articulating a 1% surplus for the people of this country. That speaks to economic growth. And when you look at the housing projects that we will embark upon shortly, that represents some 25% of GDP. And we are putting people back to work. We are putting people back to work. All the artisans in this country are going back to work. And as we sought to address the challenges that we were facing, thanks to the member for Christchurch West again who started this program, it occurred under him, the Hurricane Elsa, which I can classify as one of the fires, the freak storm, one of the fires, the ash. And let me pause at this time to recognize those ash workers who work tirelessly to ensure that we return our country and our highways and byways to some level of respectability. I think they deserve another round of applause by tapping. So, Mr. Speaker, when I look at the plan for housing all across Barbados, for the 2 years, financial years 2022, 2023, 2023, 2024, we can build 3,500 to 4,000 houses. And I have a plan here, as prepared by those lovely officers within the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance and the state-owned enterprise, the National Housing Corporation. Land at River Crescent, near River St. Philip, 140 houses. I will call a few. Housing Solutions. Lower Burnie, St. Michael, 40 acres of planning gains, and I visited Lower Burnie. And if we increase our density, because per acre we can place 10 houses or housing solutions on an acre. But if we increase our density and we look at duplexes and quadruplexes, we can have at least 14 units on an acre. And that is what we have to do, increase our density to get more housing stock in this country. Coconut Hall in St. Lucie, I mentioned. Hackett Hall in St. Michael, where we are building 3 quads using the East-West Building Solution Company. Those are the Chinese houses. We have entered into an arrangement, thanks to the National Housing Corporation, to build 150 houses presently. And these are steel structures. And I want to thank the private sector, those builders who came on board to assist us at a time when we really needed those builders to pull all the stops out to assist us as a government and as a ministry to build those foundations so that we can have 150 houses or 103 foundations built, because we are building duplexes and quadruplexes so that our people who suffer the effects of Hurricane Elsa and the freak storm can be placed back in some level of respectability in a very short time frame. But you heard the member for Christchurch West. He brought a rafter, a purlin, yesterday to show members of this chamber. And hurricane strap, I call it a purlin, it's a hurricane strap. It goes on the purlin, yes. Where we will return the housing stock to a better state in which we found them before they were struck by Hurricane Elsa. And these hurricane straps he mentioned will secure these houses in a more rigid way. And I will bring that paper to Cabinet shortly, the strap it paper, to ensure that every single home in this country is outfitted with hurricane straps. But, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, let me move on because time is of nigh. We spoke about the 4,000 houses within the first 2 years. And if you extrapolate, you will see that we can achieve 10,000 houses within the 5-year period. It is achievable. Just extrapolate from the 2 years. And those 2 years, we have to put all the necessary administrative and planning work in place. And that usually takes 6 months to subdivide land at town and country planning. Then it takes another 5 months to put in the infrastructure work. And then it takes another 6 months to construct a home, a 2 or 3 bedroom home. So if you add, you will see why we have to re-engineer our systems. And I've spoken to the member for Christchurch West. And we have to re-engineer the systems within town and country planning. I have also spoken to the member for St. Michael Southeast. We have to re-engineer the processes within Barbados Water Authority because some of the longest process that we can see is to install water within a site. And that should not be taking us no a year and 6 and 7 months. We should be having work started within 3 months of a town and country planning approval process. And this has nothing to do with the member for St. Michael Southeast. This has to do with the business processes that need re-engineering, deconstructing, and reconstructing so we can become more efficient and a lot more leaner and get these things out if we are supposed to achieve our 10,000 target in a 5-year period. But, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this brings me to something that, while we talk about a housing revolution, this was an eye-opener to me. When I recognize that we have some 35,000 unoccupied properties and vacant lots in this country. 35,000, 15,000 unoccupied properties have been identified together with the 20,000 vacant lots. And these are located in areas that have services already, road infrastructure, water. And I'm asking myself, as I ask the staff within the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, what can we do to unlock 80% of these unoccupied properties and vacant lots? What part of the legislation we can discuss with the homeowners to see how we can utilize their properties? Because some of these properties, I can understand, have been left for over 20, 25 years. Vacant lots, and some properties that we can classify them as derelict. And if you read into this, you will see that land tax arrears might be more for some of these properties than the market value of some of these properties. So we have to work with the homeowners, whom I know are waiting for us to create that policy within cabinet and then go to these homeowners to unlock the potential for home ownership in this country, utilizing not only the HOPE, but those good workers at the National Housing Corporation and the private sector entities who have done well in this country to come forward and agree and win bids to engage private-public partnerships to help us build out the 10,000 houses in this country. How can we unlock the potential of these 35,000 unoccupied properties and vacant lots? And if you calculate 80% of that, and you look at the 4,000 houses that we can build within the first 2 years, you will see, as the Prime Minister said, that that target of 10,000 may be a target, but not her target, meaning that she believes we can build more houses in this country. And I truly believe so. Once we create the policy framework and a win-win situation for these landowners and property owners, we're not going to use the Land Acquisition Act to take away person's properties out of this 35,000. But we are going to give them the opportunity to pay down some of their arrears in some form of arrangement. I don't know. It could be a leasehold. I don't know if the Land Acquisition Act caters to a leasehold. But these are some of the things we have to sit down as a government and discuss so we can unlock the potential for housing within these 35,000 lots that I have so aptly articulated and focused on this afternoon. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I spoke about the legal and regulatory framework for approval. This is something that the member for Christchurch West and I spoke about. And we have to make sure that the time taken to have a conveyance executed for a lot, say 20 acres, is reduced by half. This lies within the purview of the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance and the National Housing Corporation. We have to sit down and find ways. And we're not talking about bullying anybody. We're talking about looking and seeing ways and working as a team, how we can come up with the best structure and the best processes to allow a conveyancing to be reduced to, say, 1 month maximum for some of these large sites and some of these large properties. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, government will work with the local private sector partners, the regional partners, the international partners from Guyana, and the East-West Building Solutions from China. We cannot build 10,000 houses on our own. As a government, we have to engage private-public partnerships. We have to engage the international community, and you heard the Prime Minister. She spoke about partnerships within Guyana, the Chinese partnerships. But what I can tell you, that I've met with 300 builders within the last 2 weeks, contractors, builders, and they are on board, and they're anxious to become part of this housing revolution to construct 10,000 houses in this country. When I met with them, they were all keen. They were all working on getting persons who have been affected by Hurricane Elsa and the freak storm back into their homes. We have a long way to go. And I've assured them that we do not want the next hurricane season to come and persons who have been impacted from the freak storm and Hurricane Elsa are still left out in the cold. So we are working as a team. I love the morale that I saw last week. I love the enthusiasm. I love the motivation of those 300 stakeholders that I know are critical to us achieving the 10,000 houses. And I know that we will achieve our mission, the housing revolution that will go down in history as being the largest and most well-respected and accepted by our people. Because if you go to the highways and the byways, every single person wants a piece of this rock. But we have to shift the paradigm slightly. Because even if we can't get a piece of the rock, due to the housing solutions that we'll be offering, you can indeed achieve a home. And as John F. Kennedy said back then, a home is essential to development in this country. And indeed, it ain't everybody that can own a piece of this rock. But we believe that every single worker in this country, when we look at the various sectors, gas station attendants, general workers, $1,000 to $2,000, we have just raised our minimum wage rate. And we believe every single person will be classified within one of those groupings, and we have a housing solution for each and every one of them.
Honourable member, you have 5 more minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I spoke about international partners, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I spoke about the East-West Building Partnership, where we will be building 150 houses. And only this week, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the member for Christchurch West, my permanent secretary, and other members of my team, the general manager of National Housing Corporation, we had a video call with a contractor, a builder, someone who owns a housing firm in Guyana, who will send us 2 model houses for us to look at. Because if we truly look around Barbados and we look at the housing stock that are out of wood, hardwood, and if we can truly maintain the Bajan vernacular as we provide housing solutions, we will ensure that Barbados is indeed the #1 country within the region and within Latin America. And that is why we are taking the offer to look at these 2 model homes that will be here in April. And that is from a Ghanese firm. And thanks to the Honourable Prime Minister, I keep saying right Honourable, who visited Ghana recently at the Energy Expo and was able to do the necessary groundwork to allow us to form that partnership. But more importantly, our Barbadian workers, artisans, plumbers, electricians, builders, masons, they will be the ones constructing the houses under the supervision of the international partners who will provide the housing solutions. So we have work for every single artisan in this country. And that brings me to my final point. We have to ensure that we create the labor force to build these 10,000 houses. I heard on brass tacks only recently, the moderator asking where we will get the labor from to build these 10,000 houses. I heard on brass tacks. And I'm saying that we have to utilize our community centers and train a lot of our young people in plumbing, carpentry, masonry. We have 4,000 school leavers annually leaving school and 60,000 young people in this country. I heard the member for St. John in his presentation. He spoke about all of the wonderful work that that ministry is engaging to empower and enfranchise our young people. And within our manifesto, at page 11, the construction gateway to train artisans, we will establish an 8 to 12-week program for training of carpenters, masons, tilers, and other artisans to perform the jobs required. And the training of these artisans will include job attachment to allow the trainees to hone the skills that are needed for this building boom that we will embark upon. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have articulated a plan to build probably more than 10,000 houses, but we will stick to the 10,000. But I want at this stage too to thank our former colleague, the former member for St. Andrew, who started the work in this wonderful ministry from 2018. He did work in the electrical upgrade project across 13 housing estates. He did work in the sewerage system when we lost a life in the Pine. Tragically, someone dropped in one of our sewerage systems. He was the person who pioneered this work within the Ministry of Housing. And I think we have to pay due credit where credit is due. In 2018, we embarked upon a sewerage system upgrade to repair unsafe and unsanitary systems across 10 housing estates that accounted for 135 sewerage systems. To date, we are fixing some 270 sewerage systems, and we have reached our target of 217. So we've moved from 135, because if you look nearly every month in the paper, you will hear some estate complaining about the sewerage system. And these are ancient systems, and we have to do what we have to do for our people. And this came through overcrowding, some would say. But these are old estates from in the 50s and in the 60s. So we have to create all the housing solutions where we can return persons within those income brackets to some level of respectability and don't have 10 persons living in one unit. And I can't blame a family for bringing in every single one. We have a duty and a responsibility to provide housing solutions to address these challenges. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you on the plans for housing in this country. I want to thank the Prime Minister for giving me the opportunity as well to lead this very important ministry. And I want to leave you with the words of Isaiah 41, verses 10. Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand. I'm obliged to you, Mrs. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is an honor to be back and a privilege to be back in the good old new Parliament. It gives me pleasure to know that my colleagues and the other workers in the building and on the environs are now breathing literally safer. And even it gives me more pleasure, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to see you in that chair. You look lovely. If I do say so myself, you look like you fit. I too want to add my voice in praise for the budget that was read by the Honourable Prime Minister on Monday. And I want to really get right into the meat of the matter. I want to give congratulations on a few areas. Obviously, I don't have time to do all. The Honourable Member who just spoke mentioned about the houses being built and the photovoltaic panels, and I congratulate that. I, however, want to add a personal note here. I want to put in those myself and many of my neighbors and so on. And the governmental institution that I applied to, this months later, and I'm still waiting. So I hope the process for the other members of the public and the population is a little faster. But I give kudos to that. I want to sing praises for the pandemic contribution levy. I know I've been reading all the assessments by all the accounting firms here, and they mentioned, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South Central mentioned this morning, that people were complaining that it's a retroactive tax. I don't necessarily agree, but what I will say is long time in coming. I think as a population, we all need to contribute to the COVID fight. The government has spent, and you heard it from the Prime Minister, millions of dollars with respect to keeping this country alive and afloat and the working force working since the pandemic has begun. And I only think it is right that the institutions mentioned, the banks, and I have no regrets here whatsoever because the public of Barbados has been living in a Barbados where you put in money into the banks, they use our money in our savings, and you get back, some months I see a whole cent in interest rates. I wonder if I chose to cash in that cent, what they would give me, since cents don't exist anymore. The fees for the banks are astronomical. One of my accounts, $5 every month comes off. What happens to somebody that has a salary? We have a lot of ash workers and so on, of even much less than they get, to take $5 off in an account. And then you reach the ATMs where you cannot withdraw less than, I think $50 is the last one I saw. People don't have this kind of money. So it's about time these institutions contribute to what we have spent, not only for their employees, but for them as well. We have spent dollars on providing PPEs, money on bringing in nurses from overseas to help with the fight. We have spent money to renovate, well, I shouldn't say renovate, to almost build Harrison's Point that looked after Barbadians and is still looking after Barbadians with respect to the COVID pandemic. We have been spending money in terms of costs for quarantine and isolation facilities, which, thank God, the COVID numbers are looking much better now, so that should be less now. But I think it is time that these corporations step up to the plate and account. So my sympathies are really not with them here, and I think that it was a wonderful initiative. Although I must say now that I am grateful for the donations and the goodwill and monies and vaccines that were donated locally and overseas, I am grateful for the interventions that the local and international community made to us. I also want to mention the moratorium on the national insurance scheme. I think that is a wonderful plan. There are many of us, well, not me, but that have not been paying NAS contributions for various reasons. Some people just cannot afford the contribution, whether you are an employer or an employee. And I think the moratorium is an excellent plan to see Barbadians through, to get the NAS coffers back up to where they were. And speaking of moratoriums, I want to mention here, and during the last term, I had reached out to the powers that be, some of them, with respect to the Form 35 in Kaipo. Some of us in here who have corporations will know about what I'm speaking of. They have a form to be filled out yearly with a fee of $100 per application per year. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have many small companies here that have been incorporated that don't make a lot of money. If you are late on this $100 fee, and many people have brought this to me, if you are late on this $100 fee, you pay interest rates of $10 per day, as the people say, 7 days a week, including Sundays, capped at $3,000 every year at the end of the year. I will let you simmer on that for a minute. So your fee is $100 with application, with a cap of $3,000 in interest. And this has been going on since 2005. Many people do not know of this. Some do. It gets worse. If you want to pay the fee, although you have interest, you are not allowed to go in and pay the fee unless you have settled the interest. Which means if I take 3 years to figure out how to get the $3,000, that's 3 multiplied by 4, which is $12,000, and I can't pay the $100. If we are going to speak about moratoriums and waivers, I want somebody who is responsible, I can't remember which minister, to check out these things because they impact on small businesses. It's one thing when you have a large business and bringing in $5 million, which we hope we get him back from the pandemic levy. But it's another thing when you have a small company and cannot afford these charges. So I would like the government to look into this. So these are things that we need to be conscious of with respect to our people. We don't have the money now. Everybody went through the pandemic. Everybody knows what it is to drain the NAS. So these things need to be made right. I also want to speak on things like, let me get to where I want to be. This is where I feel most comfortable. The things like the cap on freighting charges. And where I stand now in the Ministry of Health, I have had the privilege of being a student in the hospital. I've had the privilege of being a doctor in the hospital. I've had the displeasure of being a patient or being requiring the assistance of the A&E department of the hospital, but now I sit differently. I've got to see now the hospital from all angles, as far as I could think of, from all angles now. And the cost of freight is going to impact positively on us going forward. We have the drug service, for instance. Let me give you that example. The cost of drugs have skyrocketed since the pandemic. The cost of freight, as you know, for many small businesses too, and large businesses have also skyrocketed. Which means that the availability of medications, because there are some companies that want a pay-first system, which means the ability of us getting medications required, and I will get to the NCDs, has been hampered. Not only medications, supplies for the polyclinic, supplies for the hospital, all of these were impacted by the high freight charges. So I commend the government, the Prime Minister, for coming up with these things. I also want to applaud the initiative or the plans for building a new geriatric hospital. In my view, it should be called the Home for the Aging. I don't believe it should be called a geriatric hospital, and I explain why. We need a facility where the aging, not only the sick aging, but the well aging who have no place else to go, who want a little company or living alone, no children, can go, who can pay, who can't, can go and spend the last days. These are people that have built Barbados in comfort, and so that professional people can see them through the aging process until they die. So this is why I commend that, and I think it can be used from the little view of the plans I saw, it can be used for more than geriatric care. Since the pandemic, we have had to suffer a lot. I'm excited about the increase in the tax, what we call the sugar tax, of 100% from 10 to 20% duties on the sugary drinks, beverages. I think it's a wonderful initiative. We have been trumped by St. Lucia, who came up with it a couple years ago, but I'm glad we are following suit, and I hope to get even further beyond them. But it's a great initiative. What the hope would be for me, because last time we put it up, the drinks were still sold. People did not understand quite fully the impact of these high sugary beverages on the health. What I would like to see now and to investigate, and I plan to make this one of my missions, is to have conversation with the producers of these drinks to see if they're not only paying because of the taxes, but to see if they can incrementally reduce the amount of sugars in the products they sell. When you look at a drink and it has 28 grams, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if my math is correct, that is 7 teaspoons in a bottle of drink. And we cannot afford, it's wonderful to talk about giving jobs to people, but if we don't have a workforce, I don't know who the job's going to. And this sugar tax will be, I hope, impactful. And that will lead to things like decreases in salt, front package labeling. We need to have that instituted. Yes, there will be pushback. As I said in another forum, there will be pushback from people that benefit from this in terms of the salty chips. This is not a brand name, so you could say salty chips and sugary cereals, as the Honourable member this morning alluded to St. Michael South Central. But with that, and she's right, with that comes education of the populace, education from ground level, from pregnancy, as I said before, up to death. You need to keep the fight going. It can't be like the pandemic where the vaccine started out hot and bothered and then there was a drop-off. You cannot afford that with the NCDs and health care. But I want to lend my support for that initiative with respect to the sugar tax. I too want to speak about, and this is where I want to get into the meat of the matter with respect to what I am here to do. I want it to be considered with respect to the NCDs again, and you know most of them. The cancer, which nobody seems to remember, is an NCD, diabetes, hypertension, the effects of obesity, asthma, etc., etc., etc. In my short stint, I want to see things like that come to the front burner, given that COVID, and with that I want to congratulate and praise and give due respect to the minister that left the light burning for me, Lieutenant Colonel Bostic. I want to thank him. He did wonderful efforts, not only in the pandemic, but in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Much of the public does not know of the efforts and the attainment that he made in the hospital, but they are there, and I will bring them to light at some point going forward. But we need to now refocus our efforts from COVID not fully from COVID, but from COVID into the healthcare system, there have been around the increase in NCDs and the burden that NCDs place on the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, our only public tertiary care institution. And to give you the background on that, because of the COVID situation, and I don't want to say neglect, but being placed on the back burner, the NCDs had risen. Up to last night, I had a conversation with one of the senior doctors at the hospital. And they were out of bed, one of the reasons being they're inundated by the complications of non-communicable diseases. They are seeing people coming in with cancer, breast cancer, that because of the pandemic, some 2 years are showing up 2 years later than they should have, with end-stage disease. We are seeing more like ulcers because of peripheral vascular disease, also as an effect of these things. And these are placing a burden on the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So when people talk about the wait at the accident and emergency and the wait in the outpatient clinic, it comes a lot more to that than just, I've met employees there that are enthusiastic, that are willing to work, that want to see change, that want to see the hospital running even more efficiently. So they are there. But when we have the added burden of the complications of NCDs impacting on it, it adds to it. So while the general public says, yes, the funding needs to be in the tertiary care education institution, my opinion is, and is matched by many others, is that the funding needs to put in the primary care sector so that this will bring the burden off of the tertiary care sector. The tertiary care sector was not meant to handle the volume of NCDs to which it sees because they are out of hand now. So we talk about the sugar tax, we talk about education, and this is where I want to say to my colleagues, through you, that this fight in our healthcare system involves every ministry, if not almost every ministry that is represented in this House. It involves education, and everybody knows that. It is obvious. We need to get into the schools. It involves the ministry in charge of town and country planning, because plans need to be afoot when these fast food restaurants, the proximity to schools, where they are placed. Too late for many now, but yeah, it involves that. It involves the sports arena. By the way, I want to let the minister know I'm still waiting for my hard court some 3.5 years later, but I have faith that it will come. It involves this Ministry of Sports, of course, that is also obvious. It involves the Ministry of Transport and Works, and I brought it up earlier with respect to walking paths, bicycle lanes, sidewalks. It involves, obviously, the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. And I'm glad that the standard water rates have been put in place. The farmers need to get on board, and I know the minister is doing a fantastic job. I've seen the work he has done in River with respect to I call it reservoir, I can't remember the exact name for it, but it's a reservoir in all intents and purposes. The reservoir in River that will encourage the farmers to get back into farming. And this has many effects. We can now push organic farming or low insecticide farming. We can now go back to the days where these centenarians tell you what they ate and got there. We can now get back to the ground provisions. We can decrease the import bill. We can offer food at a lower cost. And this is where that ministry comes in. There is not one ministry in here I could think of, NCC, Blue Economy, all of these impact on healthcare, on the Ministry of Health and Healthcare to see our nation move forward healthily. The Prime Minister has said time and time again, the Prime Minister before her has said to, or one minister in there, that the population has not seen an increase in a long time. Many reasons is that we have a fantastic family planning initiative in Barbados that was instituted some years ago. It almost worked too well. But how do we increase the population if we are seeing more morbidity and mortality as a result of NCDs? We just simply cannot. The burden now, and I've seen the Prime Minister increase the number of years you work before you're eligible for pension from 33 1/3 to 40 years. But that means if we do not produce a healthy population, if we don't see to it that there's a healthy population, that's null and void. You could put it to 50 years if there's nobody around to work. It's a waste of time. So the idea is, and I had issues with the retirement age, but you start early and put in 40 years, hopefully it won't go beyond 65. But it cannot lie, the burden cannot lie on a small set of people who maintain the population and the workforce. NCD's impact on the workforce, if you are spending time in the hospital, that being said, if you're working for 40 years, if you're spending time in the hospital or in the clinics, you cannot work. The man hours are lost, obviously. The burden is placed on NAS and the social system. The burden is placed on the Honourable Minister beside me here with respect to the elder care program if we cannot see health in our society. My slogan at work, and I think it was many others, I only realized that after, is the wealth of the family is the health of the family, and that extrapolates to the health of our population leads to the wealth of our population. So these are some of the things I want to speak of. And the other thing that is important here, and is not really considered an NCD on its own, but the stress level we are seeing in our country. The hospital, the stress level, and not only the hospital, healthcare service, since COVID, and probably before, has gone up, I don't know how many 100%. And with stress, most people know that leads to cancer, at least in theory, that leads, this microphone, that leads to cancer, that leads to exacerbations of hypertension, that leads to so many other morbidities that we cannot mention. We need to put things in place, and I'm relying on the ministries of sports and even culture to some extent in terms of having an NCC. You're providing the parts, and I'm grateful to you. The minister made sure that I got one in St. Philip, and there are others. We need some place for people to take a break, even if it means in the middle of a workday for 15 minutes, where you can actually literally de-stress. This is not my idea. This idea has come from another doctor, a medical colleague of mine. But we need to put measures in place on that front. So the other thing, as I said before, the honourable member this morning spoke about the zero rating of certain supplements. And she's right, there are meal replacement supplements. That being said, they are needed. When diabetics go to dietitians and so on, a lot of the time when you're feeling sick, you don't eat well. So that is needed. I'm happy to see it there. But I want other things to run at its tail, like introducing certain medications and equipment onto the national drug formulary for everybody. They're the new generation anti-diabetic drugs now. Only one of them is on formulary. These have been proven to be very effective in control of diabetes. Things like that we need to look at and relook at to get them onto the drug formulary so that more of our population can benefit from it. Barbados is a society, I guess this is why we don't have much of a heroin problem. We don't like getting stuck. We don't like needles, we don't like sticking. Things like that everybody sees it on the media abroad, overseas media. Things like the Freestyle Libre, I shouldn't call it brand, I apologize. Machine where you don't need to stick yourself 40 times a day. You can just swipe, you can use cell phones and get your blood sugar readings. These are things we need to get on board and started. Yes, it will cost money in the short term, but in the long term, we can only see benefit if we have healthy people in our nation.
Honourable member, you have 5 more minutes.
Really? That was fast. It's not like me at all. So I not like me at all. I'm usually quick at the point. So basically, you got me at a good time. These are some of the measures I want to congratulate the cabinet and the prime minister for in terms of the budget. I think the onus now is to see things implemented. We need to get the population on board with some of the things, the strategies that we are coming up with. I think overall it's a good budget. I was bracing myself, to be honest, bracing myself hard. But pleasantly surprised I took off a lot of the padding yesterday, Tuesday, and I am safe now. The blows were soft, they were, if any at all, and I am quite pleased with it. My mission now is to see that we go forward into a healthier Barbados. The funding is important. We are working on that generally with respect to estimates towards the hospital, and my colleague minister, I'm sure I have to leave something for him to speak on, so he'll brief you on that a little further later on. So that's it for me. Honourable Deputy Speaker, thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise to make a contribution to this debate, which really pulls together both the estimates process and the fiscal measures that were outlined by the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast on Monday. I first would want to thank the people of St. Peter. I did it at an earlier time, but like many of my colleagues, it feels a little bit different saying it in here. And I really thank the people of St. Peter for expressing their confidence by coming out to vote for me in the general election in January, and indicating to me that they are, to some degree at least, satisfied with the contribution that I make on their behalf and also in their name. And that confidence, they've said to me, indicates that they want me to continue to represent them in this place, to be their voice and to share their concerns in this place. I also want to say very early on that this call, and I smile sometimes when I think about it, this call that we have heard over the last 2-3 years for a budget speech indicates to me that we are in a place that we have to get away from. Because we have had what is called a budget speech every year for the last 50 years, there must be a budget speech. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the estimates of revenue and expenditure is the budget speech. Anytime you look at numbers that tell you what you can earn, what you're going to receive, and what you're going to pay out in expenditure, whether recurrent expenditure or capital expenditure, that, for the record, is called a budget. I just thought I would say that because what people have really been calling for is a statement that says, given the gap, if there is one, between revenue and expenditure, what are the fiscal measures that we're going to put in place? Now, there's absolutely no reason why those measures have to be included in a single speech. And that is really where this government has been attempting to challenge current notions or traditional notions of how things are supposed to be done. Governing, management is an ongoing process. It is not a one-day process. And so as situations develop, then measures are taken. And the Prime Minister has been very clear to use the illustration of gas and brake. You don't press gas and leave the gas on. You don't press brake and leave. You make the adjustments as we go along. Now, the measures, the fiscal measures presented on Monday, along with the estimates and the process that we went through 3 weeks ago, suggests to me that this government understands what it means not just to lead, but to manage a country, to manage a country for the benefit of the people of the country. And as I listen to the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast on Monday, two verbs came to my mind. What I heard as the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister, as I heard her speak, it was as if I was hearing stabilize and grow, stabilize and grow, stabilize and grow. That, for me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, was the theme of her presentation. Now, I think it is important to set the context. Always important to set the context, because examining anything in a vacuum is really an exercise in not futility, but stupidity. We have to know the context within which we examine any situation. And so when we came to office, because governance is a continuum, we came to office, there was high debt service. We heard lots about it. Over 60 cents, almost 70 cents in every dollar being used to service debt. And I, during the election campaign, indicated to my constituents that something like that meant that every time you work for $100, you were paying out $68 either to, I almost called court's name, but I meant the hire purchase place in town, or the itinerant salesman, but they tell me they don't mind being called coolie men. But it meant that you were spending $68 out of the 100 to pay those people or those organizations, and you were left with 32 cents to buy the bottle of gas, to buy food, to buy school clothes and school shoes. It is an untenable situation. It is an unsustainable situation, but that was the situation we found when we came into office. No growth, low reserves, and businesses, and this has to be emphasized, businesses whose operation depend on importing goods from abroad were forced to, in a lot of cases, quote, to use a term, a figure of speech, stand in a line. They were put in a queue in order to be able to obtain the foreign reserves that were necessary to pay overseas suppliers. And I want to say here also, Mr. Speaker, that our business community have to diversify. I'm not going to be too harsh, but we have to diversify away from only importing and reselling. But that said, we came into a situation where we had very low reserves. And so those same business persons were not able very quickly to be able to obtain the foreign reserves, the foreign exchange that would have been needed to allow for them to have a relatively smooth operation in their business. Subsequent to that, we moved into a situation of pandemic, ashfall, freak storm, Hurricane Elsa. We've heard it many times. But it's always important to put measures, whether they're the estimates or the fiscal measures that are used to close any gaps, in context. So there is what we found when we came to office. There is also what, through no fault of our own, became the lot that we had to face. And that is part of the context within which the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast gave those fiscal measures, expressed those fiscal measures on Monday. Outside of what we found, and outside of what we refer to as natural disasters and pandemic, whether that is natural or man-made, we also have an aging population. And the Honourable Member for St. Philip North spoke to some of that just now. An aging population. I think she said that our family planning, well, she didn't say that. She suggested that our family planning may have worked so well that we have persons living longer and persons really not being replaced. But we also, along with an aging population, face an uncertain world. And this uncertain world is not just the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, but we've seen much taking place in the geopolitical space ever since we came to office. That is the context, Mr. Deputy Speaker, within which we found and find ourselves. And it is important to understand that, to really place in focus the measures that were outlined in this Honourable Chamber on Monday. The philosophy that undergirds all that we do, and I say this as a minister responsible for what is considered a social ministry. The philosophy that undergirds all that we do, all that we have done since we came to office, and that undergirds all those measures that were shared with us on Monday, is that of shared burden, shared benefit. Shared burden, shared benefit. It goes back to what we call fairness. And you know, I had the honor of speaking. The ILO governing body is meeting as we speak during this week. And I had the privilege of sharing on a topic on one of the papers on inequalities in the world of work. And I shared on that paper within the context of having been the rapporteur last November for a working party that examined inequalities. And I was able to do that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because as a Barbadian, we understand what it means to operate fairly, to expect fairness in how people treat to other people. Now, this matter of shared burden and shared benefit is one that seems not to be fully understood, and I hope it is that, and not that it is not being fully embraced by segments of our economic landscape. I hope it is that they're not understanding as opposed to them not embracing. Because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if it is that they're not embracing the reality of fairness and the sharing of burden and the sharing of benefit, then they are demonstrating what I would consider a lack of patriotism, a lack of heart in being part of this country. And I make no apologies for saying that, but I hope that I'm wrong and that it is not that they are not accepting that burdens must be shared. We have shared burdens ever since we came to office. We had the increase in departure tax. Many would remember that that increase would have impacted mainly visitors to our country. They also shared some of the burden. Many would remember the room rate levy. Some businesses had to absorb some of that because tourism businesses, and I know this very well, spent most of my life in the tourism industry. You are not able to pass on these increases just like that. You are locked in. So a few visitors would have borne some of that burden, but many businesses also bore some of that burden. We had the garbage and sewage levy. All Barbadians who have water meters bore that burden. We increased bus fares. Persons who do not own vehicles, generally speaking, persons in the working class, bore that burden. But there were some benefits that were also shared. No sewage on our streets. And on that matter, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I just want to say, and this is to persons who live outside of Christchurch, because I had much cause to speak to this during the campaign and even before the election campaign. The view that the sewerage situation was a South Coast matter. Let me say to Barbadians that a reduction in the number of visitors coming to these shores affects people in Christchurch, in St. Michael, in St. Philip, in St. George, in St. Thomas, in St. John, in St. Joseph, in St. James, in St. Lucy, and in the best parish, St. Peter. It affects all of us. And so addressing that matter is a matter that has to be understood as addressing a national matter. But we were able to take the sewage off the streets. That was a benefit to businesses and to workers. We were able to purchase and deploy garbage trucks. We were able to purchase and deploy buses. We were able to distribute care packages. We were able to increase our welfare assistance. We were able, very importantly, to restore tertiary education free at the point of delivery for the young people of this country. We were also able to put businesses in a position where they did not have to queue up to obtain foreign exchange. We were also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, able to roll out the BEST program, which worked both for tourism businesses as well as tourism workers. As a result of the burdens that were shared, we were able to generate significant benefits that were also shared right across the spectrum of interests in this country. We were able to introduce a national minimum wage. We were able to establish overseas job programs, moving from just having one in Canada to having programs in the United States. And as we speak, we have over 100 Barbadians working in hospitality in the United States of America. We were also able to establish an agricultural workers program in the United Kingdom, and last year we had over 100 Barbadians working in that program in the United Kingdom. We were able to build Harrison's Point. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what I'm trying to say is that all of us in Barbados have to recognize that we are all stakeholders. And if Barbados is going to move forward, if we're going to stabilize and grow, all of us have to be participant in the process. We are not putting burdens, and I repeat what the Prime Minister has said many times, and many of us have said, the burdens will not, as happened in the previous administration, the previous Democratic Labour Party administration, the burden of any adjustment, the burden of any rebuilding of this country will not fall squarely on the shoulders of the workers of this country. It will not. And so those who keep some noise about whether a tax is retroactive or not, the word coming from this place Monday, yesterday, today, is that the workers of this country will not bear the full burden of any adjustments that we have to make to ensure that Barbados stays afloat. That is our clear and unequivocal stance in this matter. We also have some other benefits. In St. Peter, we were able to see the drainage situation in Speightstown addressed. we were able to see work done upstream of Spike Sound, also impacting positively the drainage situation in Spike Sound. We were also able to see tanks installed in Boscobel. We see a tank in Mount Stepney, what we call the Mount, and we see a tank in Indian Ground. These were, when we speak about stabilizing and growing, we're not talking about doing one and then doing the other. This Barbados Labour Party government has been able to demonstrate that we can stabilize and do what is necessary to build capacity, to build the country, to build our people at the same time. That is what I call excellent management. And I'm happy to be part of a government that is able to, and I don't use Honourable Member for St. Philip North. I refuse now, particularly that we have a minister responsible for NCDs. I'm not going to use the term walk and chew gum, because I think that goes contrary to where we want to go. But with sugar-free gum, I understand that there's sugar-free gum. But this government has demonstrated that we are able to stabilize and to put in place those measures that will speak to growth all at the same time. The fiscal measures identified and articulated by the Prime Minister on Monday say to all of us that stabilization is still required. And it is important to reiterate that, because oftentimes good management causes those who are looking on to believe that there are no difficulties in the environment. That happens at the level of the household, because a child is able to open the fridge and see food. They may not realize that the parent may be using either the credit card or trusting from the shop. It happens in businesses. Sometimes you are struggling with the bank, but workers are not aware and believe that all is hunky-dory. Sometimes governments are facing fiscal challenges in relation to revenue. But because people wake up and the garbage is being collected and the bus comes at the time when you need the bus, and you can use Wi-Fi while you're on the bus, there may not be the understanding. And for businesses, when you send your request for foreign exchange to the bank, it comes back in a day or two, you believe that all is well. I think that the Honourable Prime Minister took the time to indicate that while the country is being well managed, there are still challenges that we have to face. And so while we use and operate under the theme of stabilize and grow, stabilization still is important and still must be the focus.
Honourable Member, you have 5 more minutes.
I just started, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but I will be respectful of your position. The one-off contribution, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that one-off contribution should be embraced by those organizations to which it is targeted as their contribution to this country, not a contribution to the government. That 15% of net profit, not 15% of revenue, 15% of net profit. That contribution should be seen as a contribution to this country, the country within which they operate. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the targeting is, in my view, very appropriate. There were some people, and still are some people, who say that the supermarkets made a killing. I beg to differ and to disagree. Those items that were being purchased, as I go into the supermarkets, those items that were being purchased during the shutdown period were what we call basics. Those were the items that attract the lowest level of markup in a distribution context. And so, while they may have been busy, it is not the same as organizations operating in the insurance space or the telecoms space. It is not the same as the commercial banks. And those institutions must recognize that we just came through and are still going through a pandemic. I am not sure where some of those leaders are living, but it can't be overseas because the pandemic, by definition, is global. And so they must recognize that they have a responsibility to the society within which they make their profits. The imposition suggests, Mr. Speaker, that if your business was so bad that you made no profits, then 15% of zero is zero. There is no additional burden. And the matter of whether it is retroactive or not is, in my view, slightly laughable, and so I wouldn't even attempt to address it. But the philosophy of burden sharing goes beyond that because the burden is not falling only on those companies. People who earn above a certain amount, individuals who earn above a certain amount, also have to contribute. Our philosophy is that the burden is to be shared. The burden is not being placed only on commercial entities. Individuals who we have determined may be either more able or less unable to bear some of the burden are being asked to contribute to the society within which they operate. Stabilize and grow. There is much more still to be done. We've spent lots of money in medical care, lots of money in the areas that I outlined, but there's still more to be done. Water supply for the people of St. Peter, for the people of St. Thomas, and for the people of St. Andrew and St. Lucy also has to take place. There needs to be the fixing of roads, and I am mentioning this at this point because while I have assured my constituents that have already been speaking to the minister responsible, the Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast, my constituents believe that I need to be very clear in this honourable place. And as I began, they sent me here. I understand servant leadership. I understand that I stand here only at their behest. And so I will